Palworld is a new game that just came out, and you might be wondering, can you play it on the Steam Deck? Well, today I'm going to go through every single possible presettings that they have. The very low, low, medium, high, epic. We're going to start things off really easy with very low. All of this is at full screen, so it's at 800p resolution. And without any further ado, here we go. This game is pretty fun. It's like a survivor game mashed with Pokemon. This little guy that's running around with me, I actually caught him, just like you would if he was a Pokemon. At very low, we're getting around the 40 frames per second. It dips into the mid-30s. Mind you, this game just came out, so I'm assuming it's going to get more optimized later on. The developers are probably going to push things out. It feels safe to say that this is going to be the worst performance you're going to get out of this game. And already, very playable. Time to jump in here and go to low. Because again, we were on very low. On low settings, it kind of looks like we're just hovering in the mid 30s, but it dips down to the pretty low 30s. However, staying above 30 frames per second, it would be nice to see this game at very low, getting close to that 60, if not 60, and at low, maybe being able to lock it in at 45 frames per second. So I really hope that with some time, the developers can optimize this game. But again, it looks really good, even at the really low settings, and it's staying above that 30. There's no dips or anything. I feel as now we are going to quickly start treading into some deep waters, changing to medium. Yeah. Poor little game. The little Steam Deck is trying so hard, but it's kind of right in that mid-20s, and it's really not ever going up to even 30. It's just right in there, mid-20s. However, with no major dips or stuttering or anything like that, so it's basically Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch. I want to see if maxing out the GPU makes any kind of difference at all, and I'm going to cap the frame rate at 30 and see if we can get a little bit closer to 30 as opposed to that mid-20s. But now we're getting like 20. Lows. We're not even hitting 25 anymore. So pinning the GPU is not helping in this situation. And as you can see, the GPU is at 99%. I mean, there was nothing left to give it. So this, yeah, not recommended. Okay, I'm going to turn manual GPU back off, but keep it capped at 30 hertz and see if that maybe makes any difference. But again, it doesn't seem to be making any difference. Well, 27, 28 frames per second. Maybe it's making like 1-ish frame per second difference, capping the frame rate. But I don't know, not really. It's not making that big of a difference. The Steam Deck just can't really handle this at medium settings. So why don't we try to go to high settings? Because maybe it can do that. Probably not. Oh yeah, we're getting into some rough territory here, guys. What is impressive is how stable it is. So we are getting 20 frames per second, which is not good at all, but there isn't any stuttering or huge dips and just gross stuff like that. I'm not trying to say this is playable at 15 to 20 frames per second, but I've seen a lot worse, I guess is what I'm getting at. All right, now it's time to kick things up to epic. Poor little OLED Steam Deck might just explode. Honestly, it seems to be handling it just about as good as it was doing with high, which is probably not too surprising. It's not handling either of those very well. Chilling in that 15 to 18 frames per second. You know, if you're desperate and you really want that quality, I suppose you could do this, but I just don't see why you would. The game looks really good at low, and it looks good at very low. So, probably not. What we can do is come in here and do a little bit of custom. Get the shadows all the way to low and the effect quality all the way to low. So this is the epic settings, but just bringing those two things down to the lowest quality. And what do you know? Chillin', right around that 30 frames per second. Every once in a while, it's dipping down to 29, but you would never know if you weren't looking and staring at that little graph on the top. Just by changing those two effects to low, everything else can be on epic on this game, which is a good choice. If you want to play at 30 frames per second, these are some good settings for that. Now I want to try setting it down one notch to high, but then again, the shadows to low and the effect quality to low, and see if we can get a really consistent 30 frames per second at these settings. It kind of seems like it's doing about exactly the same. There is a chance if we got into some more intensive areas, maybe there were more critters running around and fighting happening, some effects going off, that being in high versus ultra would be beneficial. But right now, this little test, we're seeing about exactly the same performance from the high to epic. Just by bringing the shadows and effect quality to low, you're able to play this at about 30 frames per second. And now, because I know some of you are going to say, but Josh, it's still dipping below 30 frames per second. What do we need to do to play at a constant 30? Well, we'll set things to medium, shadows to low, effect quality to low. And now we are getting a very constant 30 frames per second. So, what have we learned? We have learned that if you really can't handle any dips, you'll have to go to medium and then lower shadows and effect quality. But the game looks great on these settings. Just disregard those little dips right there. Just forget you saw that. This is honestly how I'm probably going to play this game. I would love if it could get closer to 40 frames per second though, so I'm going to see what we can get by bumping up the frame limit. Same settings, medium, shadows, effect quality, low, but now we're capped at 40 hertz. And it's doing a pretty good job. We're definitely not locked at 40, but we're staying above 30 and jumping up into the 40s. So if I don't care about battery or anything, this actually might be the settings that I do. Medium, but then bumping the shadows to low, effect quality to low, and locking at 40 hertz. Just so that every once in a while, it's a little bit smoother than 30 frames per second. But now I want to see what we got to do to get above 30 frames per second. I'm going to go to low settings, shadows effects at low, and then cap the frame limit to 36, because it's still not going to get 40. But if we could get a solid 36, that's better than 30. And it's really trying. It wants to do this. It's honestly doing a pretty good job. It's staying at 36 most of the time. And anytime there is a dip, it stays above 30. But it's pretty consistently staying at that 36 frames per second with these settings. So it's hard to say what settings you should do because it depends what you want. But this is another good option. Just depends what you want to get out of it. Okay, we're going to go back to the very low presets, but we're going to cap the frame rates to 40 hertz. And we're going to see if that makes any difference compared to the first time that we did very low settings. The hope is that this locks us to a 40 frames per second, because earlier when we did it, it was definitely not locking at 40. It was kind of jumping all over the place. But this is doing a pretty good job. I feel like it's a little bit more consistently staying closer to that 40 frames per second. So sure, we're not going to get above 40 frames per second anymore. But if you're looking for consistency and a little higher frame rate, it looks like in this game, you're going to have to stick with the very low settings and maybe capping it at 40 hertz. This game just came out, and I'm pretty sure that we can expect some updates to come out that is going to improve the performance across the board. And so this is probably something that we will come back to in a couple months and see how the progression has come along. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to subscribe. Stay tuned for more. Later.